What's going on, guys? This is a gear review for the Luxe Minipeak XL Teepee tent. A very popular tent that I've had for about 6 months now. I've used it on, I think, 5 trips. Super excited to talk about it, give a quick gear review. 2 quick things before we jump into this review, guys. First, a lot of this footage was actually filmed a few months ago when we had our last snow. I just haven't had a chance to get it together yet, which is why you're now seeing the finished product in July. 2, I'm looking a little scruffy because I am trying to grow some facial hair here. I am a grown-ass man, but I have never in my life been able to grow facial hair, so I'm gonna give it a go. We'll see what happens. Just a heads up. The way I'm gonna structure the review, guys, is we'll just jump on the website very quickly, go to luxe.com, or actually luxehikinggear.com, take a look at some pricing and options for the tent. Second, we'll actually jump outside and put the tent up. I'll show you a few tricks I've learned when you're throwing this thing up that might help you when you're actually pitching the tent yourself. Then once the tent's up, guys, we'll jump inside, we'll talk specifications, I'll do a once around to look at all the features. Then, as always, we will finish with clips from the field, actual trips out in the Colorado wilderness, so you can see this tent in action. Let's jump on the website, guys. It is, if you look here, luxe-hiking-gear.com. And I'm gonna just go ahead and scroll down into the tent section. We can go view all. And I'll show you, they have a ton of different tents here. In fact, there's the Minipeak 2-person, the smaller version of what we're looking at. It's only $135. But again, it's smaller. It's too small for me. I'm 6'3" tall, guys. So when you see I'm 6'3", probably 240 right now, and I needed a tent that's large enough for me and my gear, potentially other people. So when we look here, guys, the tent I ended up going with was the Minipeak XL Pyramid. It's a 3-person wood stove hunting tent. Teepee tents right now, guys, are hugely popular, right? There's a huge trend with hot tent camping. It's kind of a fad, if you will, almost. This tent is a very affordable way in. Some of the other brands I won't mention, you're talking $700 per tent. That's more than I'm ever gonna be paying myself. At least I don't ever see myself paying that much. But for this tent, if we look here, guys, they have it listed at $259, but that is with the inner liner. Originally, they only sold it with the winter liner. Now you can get it without. However, watch this, guys. If I take the winter liner off, it's now price-wise $189, but sold out. So you can't even get it right now in this version or with these options. So it's $189 for the base version, which is just the outer tent only. You can also go with, and this is what I did, I actually chose the inner liner. I'll show you some clips from that as well. But it's a winter liner, which is a dual wall tent for you. Real winter 4-season tent. Let's look at the stove jack here in the picture real quick. When you look at that, guys, and you first take this tent out, it's gonna be a hole, a big square hole in your tent with Velcro around the edges. You get 2 patches right here. You get an outer rain patch. You can use it by itself. Inside, there's also a stove jack. So you've got that heat-resistant stove jack you can use if you're running a wood stove in this thing. Okay, let's go outside and get this thing set up. The first step is gonna be staking out the 4 corners. That's what I'm doing here, guys. Now the tent, when you pull out the sides, isn't gonna be a true square, but you need to make sure that the corners are staked out square to each other. They need to be pulled tight into that square. The next step after getting those corners staked down is to get your trekking poles lashed together, and that's gonna be your center support for the tent. And guys, I have to have 2 trekking poles lashed together. When you buy the tent, Luxe gives you one of these little Velcro straps that you can use to bind it. I also picked a couple others up at a hardware store, very inexpensive, but that way I can really get a nice tight bind on those 2 poles. The best way I found to attach the 2 poles together is handle to handle. This gives you something to really tie down to. You can lash it firmly together, gives you a nice strong support. Because of that, the end of this trekking pole is gonna be pushing up into the tent. You don't want that metal piece going into the tent fabric, so make sure you have one of those rubber stoppers to put on top before you firm up the tent. All right, now that that's up, let's jump inside. Well, already so much nicer in here than it was outside. There's a little snow. I opened the vents up here. There's some roof vents I'll show you here in a bit. And it's let some cold air in, but it's so much warmer in here than it was when I was out there setting up. So guys, the dimensions of this tent are 8 feet, it was at 8.85 feet long by 8.2 feet wide. Okay, so it's almost square, but it's a little longer than it is wide. Rated for 3 people. You can see how much room there is, by the way. And it's also 5.25 feet high. There's 5.25 feet of height in here. Once that coffee's set, we'll do a full tour outside. I can show the rigging, the guy lines, how you throw this tarp up. And I can tell you, pitching this, for me, took a couple tries to really learn how taut to pull it. You pull this thing tighter than you'd think to really get a nice, even pitch. This tarp, floorless, right? There's no floor, so if you don't have the inner tent with you, you just throw a tarp out to sleep. This is my winter shelter. I've been using it now for 3 or 4 trips, always in tandem with a wood stove. I have a little ultralight wood stove that I use that's really nice. But this tent for winter camping has been great. Total weight of this thing is 2.9 pounds. Okay, so the tent total tarp is 2.9 pounds, and there's no poles. That does not include the weight of your trekking pole. So this whole thing, guys, is made out of 68D non-rip poly. It's not sil nylon. Almost all of the Luxe tents are sil nylon. This one is non-rip poly, so it's gonna be heavier. It weighs 2.9 pounds. But it doesn't sag. If it gets wet, you don't have to go out and readjust things in the middle of the night because it starts stretching. You don't have to worry about that. So while this water finishes heating up, I'm gonna step outside. Let's do a once around and I'll show you all the rigging and how this tent sets up. So like I said, you stake these 4 corners out. And the 4 corners, guys, when we look down here, you've got hooks for the inner lining that you can hook onto inside. Full adjustable straps. These are heavy duty straps that you stake in. That's the 4 corners that you want to stake. Once you get those going, you then pull these little walls out, right? The longer walls pull out. There's a bottom pull out. And then there's also a guy line that you can really tension this thing out, get a nice tight pitch. When you look at the roof here, guys, there's these roof vents. You can close and seal off if you'd like to. You can open them up. They've got the little sticks like a lot of tents do. I can't do it with my left hand, so let me try it with my right. There. Get it stuck back there for ventilation. So you can really like tighten this thing down if you want to hold in the heat, but if you're running a stove or something, you probably want that open. And over here, on this side is that removable flap. This is what I was talking about, guys. This is regular tent material. Underneath it, I've got a stove jack, so I can run a stove pipe out of this thing if I want to. You can run one or the other or both. And guys, last thing I'll say about when you're setting this thing up, this thing really takes more tension. You're gonna pull it tighter than you think you need to, and you're gonna get a nice pitch. I've had heavy winds and this thing flaps a little bit, but it holds up real well. Backside of this tent is just the same as the other. There's 2 doors, 2 vestibules you can open up. What that allows you to do is really open this thing fully. I'm not gonna do it right now in the snow, but you can open this thing up, almost make it like a little lean-to shelter if you'd like. There's another roof vent back here on the backside as well, so you can get 2 of those open. Get some good ventilation going. Really warmed up in the tent now that I have this stove going. So nice to be back in here. This coffee. So you can see as I was out there walking around, guys, you really just stake those 4 corners in. And my difficulty at first was not realizing you're gonna make a square with the corners, even though the sides are gonna be pulling out further than that later once you put this center pole in. Once you put the center pole in, you're gonna pull out the middles, pull out your guy lines, and really make it tight. So overall reviews for me, guys, just takeaways. I'm 6'3". When I lay out, I've got a foot on either side of me in room. I could easily fit another 2 guys in here my size without the stove. With the stove in here, you could have the stove plus 2 dudes my size. It'd be a little bit tight, but you'd make it work. Now that I've got my coffee going, guys, I'm gonna grab the camera. We've done a once around on the outside. I'm now gonna do a once around here on the inside. I'll show you what you get, what you see, and everything for me, guys, has been great quality with these Luxe tents. I've really enjoyed it so far. So let me show you the inside. All right, so inside the tent here, you can see that stove jack with the outer cover for rain. I can tell you guys, if you were ever to hear lightning and you're running a stove, you'll be pulling that thing in real quick, burning your hands and covering it up, because that's, I'm sure, conductive. When you move to the top, you can see some little
hooks and places to hang stuff up here. And then you've got these roof vents I was talking about, where the little stick can push out and keep it open, or you can close it up if you'd like and really close off that ventilation. Inside, there's lots of little hooks here for inner liners, for bug liners. You can kind of set these as you like. I use the bottom hooks for my tarp. So if I have a tarp in here, I'll be using the bottom hooks just to kind of give it a curve. It's not a bathtub floor, but it keeps you from just having a lip hanging underneath that tarp. And I also like to pitch this thing really close to the ground. You could have it more elevated, have some more room for ventilation coming through, but man, I like to pitch it as close as I can to the dirt. And that really, guys, is all there is in here. It's a very basic tarp shell, no floor. That is what
now you've seen the inside of the tent, the outside of the tent. We've talked about most of what it comes with. My experiences over the last 6 months and 5 trips has been very positive. Really like the tent. I've used it in heavy winds.
It's actually about midnight. I ate dinner, came back and laid down for a little bit, and then it got cold, so I woke up and started the stove.
Heavy storms, and it's performed very, very well. 2 things I'll say is maybe not cons, but negative takeaways just to be aware of I should say, the first is going to be size, just size in the pack. This is the actual tent right here. This is the tent and the winter lining. So if you're not taking the winter lining, it's only about half the size. Still, in this case, is pretty large compared to most backpacking tents. Granted, it's a winter tent that you can have a wood stove in. When I carry this in my pack, I usually don't use this bag. I just fold it as flat as I can, put it in the very bottom of my pack, and then just stuff everything else on top of it. The second negative takeaway is going to be that one of the panels, guys, no matter how I set this tent up, always sags. And here, let me show you the video. If you look here where my mouse is, this corner has this weird sag, and no matter how I tie this tent down, how I stake it out, how I make adjustments to it, how I pull everything as tight as I can, that corner, for whatever reason, is always a little saggy. So I don't know if that is a defect in maybe the sizing of that panel, maybe the sewing of the panel, maybe it's just me, probably me. But those are the 2 takeaways I have that are slightly negative. Now, to finish this video off, guys, I'm going to show you some clips from the field, from some of the trips with this tent so you can see it in action. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon. Bye.
Once this tent was put together, I assembled the stove. It's actually really easy to do. It took me about 5 minutes total to put it together. What's cool about this stove is it weighs less than 2 pounds. So when it's broken down, it goes in your backpack, less than 2 pounds, but it's a wood stove burning in the tent right now, providing...
All right, well, camp is set. I'll just have to get my bed made here in a little bit. But when we look inside here, we've got the pile of firewood good to go, sorted by size. Ready to light up here in a bit. I'm out of breath because I was chopping wood up here at altitude. Then over here to the right, got all the gear. And as we come over to the other side of the tent, we have the inner winter tent that I'm gonna put the bed and sleeping bag in here in a little bit. We'll see how warm the stove keeps this thing. I'm gonna put a thermometer outside, thermometer inside. I'm also gonna see, once I stoke it with those large pieces over there, how long does it burn, right?